From the heart of the Blue Ridge, Roanoke, Virginia, it's the Just Bernard Show with host Bernard Alvarez. Join Bernard as he shares topics that reveal the real matrix and empower your human experience, including world liberty, the esoteric, suppressed technologies, spiritual ascension, and human consciousness. Humanity has awakened, and our time has come to realize our full potential. And now, live from the Star City, your host, Bernard Alvarez.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Just Bernard Show across all of my many platforms. I'm so glad you are joining us here today. I've got a really great guest joining us today. We're going to be talking about empaths and transmuting negativity and how can we better, how should we say, take care of ourselves, especially for those of us who have empathic abilities. So we are going to be talking with Michelle Welch in just a few moments. But before that, I just wanted to say hello and give you all a few moments to log on and say hello in the chat. Make sure to let us know that you're here. This week has been a little bit easier than last week. I'm sure many of you will agree that especially as an empath, the tumultuousness of our world seems to be simmering down a little bit. But as an empath, I have to admit that I myself have I don't want to say a little bit of anxiety, but a little bit on my guard, just keeping an eye on things and making sure that we are all taking care of each other, living in peace and in harmony. So let's continue to do that. I was able to check in with a few of you on my Facebook page, actually quite a few of you. So thank you so much for letting us know how you're doing. And as usual, we will continue doing the great work of elevating the consciousness of humanity and doing our best to heal our one human family, which is what we try to do here on this show. We've got a lot of wonderful guests coming up during we always have wonderful guests, but if you check out the events section of the Facebook page, you'll see I've already put up several more guests coming up. And then, of course, we have the cross quarter day between the winter solstice and the summer solstice. And the spring equinox. We have Imbolc coming up in a couple of weeks. We're going to be doing a purification ceremony as well as doing a group intention to kind of grow into what it is we'd like to see in our lives this year. So keep an eye out for that and prepare for that. We're going to be doing it interactive, and I'd like you to join me in doing that. So let me tell you a little bit first about my wonderful guest who's joining me today, Michelle Welch. Let me show you the cover of her book. I hope the blue screen lets me. Yes, it is. Yay. I have really been enjoying it. It's called The Magic of Connection, Stop Cutting Cords and Learn to Transform Negative Energy to Live an Empowered Life. And we're going to go more into the book itself. And by the way, there's some great reference stuff in the background and as far as like energy and crystals, and I've really been enjoying that. But let me tell you about Michelle. She is a psychic medium, a medical intuitive, and energy worker. Michelle specializes in helping people gain clarity, discover their soul's purpose, overcome trauma, and claim self-empowerment. She is an ordained minister, Reiki master teacher, and a crystal healer master teacher. Her own life transformation from successful attorney to passionately assisting others on their life path has given her a unique perspective and insight in helping empower others to honor their gifts in a variety of situations. And as I said earlier, her new book is called The Magic of Connection, and we are going to talk about that and how it is being an empath and how can we transform negative energy. So without further ado, welcome to the Just Bernard Show, Michelle. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I am very honored to be here and excited to talk to you today.
Oh, well, I am excited to talk to you too, and I'm sure many of our viewers are excited to hear a little bit about our discussion. So without further ado, I'd like to start a little bit to help share your journey with us. So many of us are coming into our own, whether it be intuitively, energetically, etc., and are having like this inner awakening. And so moving from one path to another might be a little bit difficult, and you've made a very big transition from being an attorney to an intuitive, a psychic, and a healer. Tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you are today.
So I knew, like many of us, I was awakened at an early age, but really not awakened in the sense that I had a lot of conditioned beliefs put on me. Okay. And I will say that, when you're really little, I love my parents and everything, but I'm in the South, I'm in Texas, and I was raised with a lot of conditioned beliefs. And part of those conditioned beliefs were that I put on myself. I put on myself to be very driven. I wanted excellence in all things. If I say I'm ever competitive, it's with myself. I'm very hard on myself, but I had a lot of things. I was very psychic. I knew a lot of things, a lot of medical intuitive things from a very young age, but those would be called the gift of prophecy, the way I was raised. So I was raised with all these gifts, knowing it, but I was always told to be quiet about them unless they were talked about in a certain context. And, in my stores, all of that is welcome. We don't judge or pass judgment on any context or any way somebody wants to frame their gifts. But for me, it became, as I practiced law, which I was very, like I said, very driven. I became a lawyer at the age of 24, and I was trying cases. I was trying murder cases, trying pretty serious cases by 24 and a half, almost 25 years old. And I was an empath, almost 25 years old, these cases greatly, and really sensing and thinking, picking juries and thinking how incredibly smart I was, because I would pick these great juries, right? And people would call me down the hall to help them pick their juries because for some reason I could pick these really great juries. Well, now I know that I really wasn't, I might be kind of smart, but I was using my intuitive abilities to pick these juries. And so I was using all of that intuitive knowingness in my career from a young, that I had from a young age, and that I had sort of repressed, and it was coming out in my law career. And then, so I practiced, and then I went into criminal defense, and it was kind of, still, as an empath, those things were very hard on me. And I didn't know, I was not raised with any training to know how to handle my empathy. And a lot of books that are out there now help us know, right, how to handle our empathy and how to protect against everything. I'm sure we'll talk about that in a minute. But how did I get out of law? So fast forward through getting out of criminal defense, getting into having 2, 3, if I count the small one in Scottsdale, 3 very successful law practices. And at the height of my law career, I was not happy. And I was very unhappy, not happy in a marriage, and just awakening, like you said, knowing there's more. And I do not see what I transition into in any way as going backwards. I believe I awakened to more. My life is so much happier and knowing there's more than it was when, by worldly standards, I was, at the top of this big legal career. And so, am I still driven in everything I do? Yes, but that's with myself still. That's still something I have to work on, this perfectionist thing. But that's how it happened. And it really came about for me with needing some serenity. Lots of lawyers are not really happy. And there are some that are, and they can be awakened in that. But it was combining all that empathy and taking all that on and not knowing what to do with it. in every situation, and then getting into all the big, the practicing with the big corporate firms and all of that, and the rat race, and how that wasn't fulfilling my soul either, and just not being happy in my life, and knowing that there was something more. And that's when I went back to what I knew as a child, but I knew that I was going to look at it in a different way.
Isn't that interesting how sometimes we have to live through what we don't want to realize what we do want, it seems,
Exactly.
especially with so many of us that have, myself, halfway through my life, well, hopefully only a quarter way through my life, I decided that was enough. I wasn't going to do the corporate thing. And I don't know if you want to call it corporate, but the mainstream thing. And again, it was that whole idea of just what you said, that learning to handle our gift in a way that it doesn't drain us. And in certain situations, it can be very draining, especially as an empath. And with that being said, talk to us a little bit about what an empath is. There might be some people watching that are like, well, is it empathy? What are the traits of an empath? Because I know so many of us out there are watching and probably wondering if they are themselves.
Okay, so, and this is where I will say my book varies a little bit. So I do touch on what an empath is, but my book, I believe, is one of the few books, and I read a lot, Bernard. I read all the time. This is my first book to write, and I will say it's quite different to write than it is to read all the time. I thought, boy, I'm a great reader, so I'll be a great writer. And it's a challenge. It's very different. I'm going to be a lot nicer to authors now, but it's, so all the books out there that I read, talked about what I'm about to say, what it is to be an empath. It's those of us who, I started the book off like, are you sensitive? Do you seem to you lean into everyone else's energy? You acutely feel everyone's energy. It may not just be people. It may be crystals. It may be the environment. It may be the ocean. It may be animals, but you acutely feel the energy because we're all energy. Everything's energy. It just takes on different forms, and everything's energy, and there's a limited amount, right? And it never goes away. It just changes forms. So these empaths, you, me, I can feel it. We both are, right? And so sometimes we'll get called too sensitive. Sometimes we'll be told, or we'll feel like I can't. There's a lot of can'ts in the books that I had read before. I can't be around that negativity. I can't handle that. I can't do that. There's a story in my book about, I came home from law school, and I walked into a room. I think it was, I was pregnant, actually. I was graduating. I think I was getting married. And so we're having a baby shower, or a wedding shower. I'm getting confused, but a wedding shower. And I walked in the room. This party was for me, right? But I walked in, I immediately thought, they're upset with me. Why are they upset with me? And that's, a lot of empaths will do that. You'll feel the energy of the room. And I kind of call it in the book kind of reverse narcissism, in the sense that maybe it's not even about me, but I will sense the energy of someone else, and maybe they have a headache. And now when you add intuition in there, a psychic knowingness, you may actually be right. They may be talking about you or gossiping about you, and that's a whole nother layer to it. But sometimes it's just leaning into that energy more acutely. Now, I do propose in the book, and it shocked me that a lot of psychologists and psychiatrists agreed with me. I expected them to kind of argue with me, that almost everybody is some type of empath. And I don't want to get off on that subject too far, but some type. They may lean into fear and want to lean into people's fear, okay, on some level. But I'm talking about where we really just absorb everybody's energy. Where my book goes in a different direction is I want us to get away from what we can't do and start choosing, and stop always protecting and putting walls up and barriers up. And not that we won't use those tools sometimes. I have a store full of sage and black tourmaline and all those wonderful, and bubbles of protection and all the wonderful things that are in my book. and exercises. But I want us to get to that next step where we learn that we are magical and we can transmute energy. We can do what a black tourmaline can do. We are human black tourmalines. If a black tourmaline can absorb energy, if a black tourmaline can deflect energy, and by the way, determine whether it's negative or positive, because how does it know, really? And it can then transmute it, because that's what we say it can do. Why can't we? So that's where my book was a little bit different than every other book I've read. That's where my book was a little bit. And so that's, but as far as the empath, that's what it is. It's where we just feel, we're like sponges. We just take on everybody else's pain. And that's what's so hard right now, right, Bernard? It's just so hard for us, you know? And we do, I think a lot of us right now, it's difficult to transmute. So we need those protective tools. Because unless we've really practiced the transmutation, the exercises in the book, believe me, I'm still needing the tools. Like I have my black tourmaline, I have, you know, I have my selenite, I got my sage, you know, but it takes practice to get to where we're just doing that alchemy, that moving that energy around without needing all our tools.
Yes, yes. And I really like that you talk about that in your book, and especially you touched on something which I thought was kind of bold, and I'm glad you did. And you're talking about it now, but to go a little bit more specifically into it, you know, it's very common for us to, those of us that do this type of work, to do something that people call, you know, cutting the cord. And, you know, so much of, I mean, even some of the shamanic work that I do, like soul retrieval and whatnot, a lot of that has to do, is emphasizing, you know, cutting the cord of either old karma or agreements that we have made or whatnot. And so many times, even with my own clients that are reliving the same episode with the same person of the same drama or the same trauma over and over, you know, I always say to them, like, you've got this psychic link with them. You need to cut that cord. And I don't know if I do it subconsciously because that's the term we use, but you know, when I'm saying it, I'm usually saying, you know, stop feeding them energy, basically is how I mean it. But it's used in so many different ways. And what I love that you touch on in the book is kind of what you're saying now is, instead of cutting the cord, to transmute the energy that we're connected to and use it, well, beneficially for both parties involved. So tell us a little bit about what you mean by that. Well, let's talk about the cords, and how do you mean transmuting them?
Right. So, and you explained, and thank you for being open to it, because I in no way ever want to attack what someone believes. That is not what I'm about. I was raised with, and not to be ugly about my parents or anything, but I was raised, like I said, with a lot of conditioning. So I want people to come to what they believe on their own. So when the title, my subtitle came out, I was like, oh, y'all put that right on the front of the book, didn't you? Just right there. It kind of shocked me a little bit. I love Llewellyn. They're wonderful publishers, but I think they had me step right into that and own it, right? And so it scared me a little bit, but it's in the book. And I even recommended a book yesterday to one of my clients. It's Soul Healing, I believe is the name of it. It's a soul retrieval. It's a shamanic. It's a book I had to read for one of my doing a doctorate thing, and it's had to. We'll talk about it later. So I'm sure you've read it. Such a good book, and it's soul retrieval, and it talks about that. But what I meant by that is I have so many people, when it hit me about the cutting cords, is I had so many people coming to see me, and I would do it. I would get out my arrowhead obsidian, or just in my, and I don't claim to be a shaman by any, I don't appropriate that. They're, you know, that is for you and people that are shamans. But my type of healing, I do a karmic, what I call a stellar gateway healing. And the way I do that now, after realizing people would come to me and say, I've had these cords cut so many times. So I really started thinking about it. And I thought, okay, logically, I just want to think logically, case by case, like I would present a lawsuit. If we are all one, and if we believe that premise, and if you don't believe that, then we might not get, if someone doesn't believe that, but if we are all truly one and we're all connected, then there's really 0 degrees of separation, really. We're all connected, and we're severing a part of ourselves. So instead, wouldn't it be better to heal those cords of connection, those things that tie us together, and stop feeding, like you said, feeding the energy? And like the more and I talk about it in the book, the more we perpetuate trauma on trauma, which I think when you cut cords, it's pretty traumatic. Mm-hmm. And so the more you're actually feeding, it seemed contraindicated. When I just sat one day, it was just this aha moment. And so if it's working for somebody, then by all means, keep doing it. But I saw person after person after person who said, the minute I see my ex-husband again or ex-wife again to have to exchange the kids, it fires right back up. So it was maybe dormant, but then we've got to work on it again. And so instead, I'm not saying we have to be best friends with our abuser. I'm just saying we have to do our part to send healing and love through that cord. And then I think that's why this book is so necessary right now, because if we could do that in the world, because think about how many of us are just saying, I'm cutting that person off, I'm cutting that person, I'm cutting, I'm blocking, I'm unfriending, I'm blocking, and it's just everywhere. And at some point, we're going to have to realize that I'm cutting off a part of myself when I cut you off. If I believe that we're all one.
Absolutely. And, and in defense of the cord cutting, there is a time and a place for it where, let's say you are being abused or whatnot, you want to sever ties, if only just for a moment for you to heal. But in the end, you are absolutely right. If we don't come to a place of healing within that interaction, that energetic connection, just like you said, you see your ex-wife or your ex-husband and boom, it starts all over again. That cord, that psychic link is recreated, and it goes on. And you made me, you helped me bring up a thought or a term that I use a lot and that I work with, and that's working with the shadow self. And how the more we try to push away the shadow aspects of our nature, the more it rears its ugly head, and that it's important for us to develop a relationship with it, versus preferably a loving relationship with it, and giving it the legitimacy to exist. And again, I'm seeing these connections with the world today, just like what we're seeing now. People have the right to exist, and so do some of these connections that we keep trying to cut. So, thank you for that. What do you think about that, the shadow self, and how does that apply here with what you're saying?
I totally agree. I mean, I think it's shadow self is also is energy. I mean, so if everything's energy, that's part of us. It's real. I mean, it's a real part of us, right? And so it's not just this thought or this idea. It's a real part. It's a real energetic part of ourselves that I completely agree with you. I will say, I have a whole chapter on what I call forgiving from a distance. I have worked with for years a battered women's, it's called Genesis Women's Shelter here in Dallas. I'm in Dallas, Texas, and I have been extremely involved for many reasons, personally and otherwise, in this women's shelter. And I take it very, very seriously when I talk about, and I made it very clear in the book, that when I'm talking about not cutting cords, that does not mean that I'm saying you have to have a relationship with. And I really want to make that clear because I devote a whole chapter to it because
Great.
it is so important that I emphasize that, because I would never want somebody to hear that. Now, I hope you don't mind me just interjecting that, because I try to say that on every interview. I don't ever want anybody to hear that, because it's where people might automatically go. That's the extreme, right? And I talk about the fact that we can still heal. And the shadow side, we want to heal that aspect. And if the more, like you said, that we resist it, the more, and we push it down, the more we need our shaman, our healer to help us work on that when we're ready. And, one who's very experienced like yourself to work on that with us. And we want to make sure we have somebody very experienced in that. And I would just say, I would take it, if you read the Forgiveness from a Distance chapter, I would say that I would think you still, this is where we would vary a little bit. I would think you still don't cut cords. I think you still can, but I think it's just semantics.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I really do think it's just a matter of semantics.
A lot of times it is. It's just semantics.
It's just semantics. We're doing the same thing, but I think at that point, it comes down to having someone who's very skilled in what they do. And that's when you do get someone who understands serious shadow work and understands the soul retrieval and things like that you do.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. We're running out of time. God, this has been such a great discussion. I wish it was an hour long. But before we go, I think we have enough time. Michelle, can you tell us a little bit, or maybe share with our viewers, what would be either a tool, an exercise, or a first step that they could utilize in the beginning of the transmuting the negative energy to be more beneficial? Well, how does the transmutation begin?
That's a great question. I think probably the first step that I would do is once you've acknowledged, quickly I'll say this, once you've acknowledged, because there's so many steps, but once you can sense energy and you start to mind your own energy instead of minding everybody else's energy, because that's one of the biggest problems empaths have. Mm-hmm. Not because they're nosy, but we're just always worried about everybody else's energy. Then once we can recognize that, then we can say, okay, it's learning to visualize that if that's really energy, I can mold it into a different form. So I would say the first step is to learn to visualize energy. And a lot of people will tell me, I can't visualize, Michelle, and I will take issue with that. And I'll say, work on it, practice, take it from step one. Don't skip the exercises in the book that maybe somebody thinks, oh, I know how to do that. Just really do the exercises. And then I practice transmuting on the road in Dallas when I think, somebody cuts me off and I'm like, okay, now wait a second. And I change the form of that energy into something else that I can use for vitality instead of anger for myself. So it's really changing the form of it as opposed to dressing it up, which is the nice form of it, or the easy form is transforming. Transmuting is literally turning, water into wine. It's magic, and so, but it takes practice. So the first step would be where you are, and then that visualization practice of the fact that you literally can change the form of energy. Because every time we just try to sweep it away, like with sage, although I sell it, and things like that, or we just try to, use that, we're not necessarily changing the form of it. All right, it's because energy never goes away; it just changes form. So we really have to learn to change the form of it. So that's what I'd say.
That's a great place to start and a great place to end. Unfortunately,
I love talking to you. Yes, you're so great.
I'm enjoying talking to you. I wish we could go on longer. I really am. So Michelle, tell us. I believe the book is either just been published or about to be published.
It was published. Yes, it's out already. It's everywhere. SoulTopia, Llewellyn, Amazon. So it's anywhere the independent book stores. Yeah, So
Great, great. And as far as like people finding more out about you and some of the things that you're doing, tell us, maybe remind everybody of your website and where they can learn more about you or get in contact with you.
MichelleWelch.com. It's as easy as that. Yeah. Yes.
I find that to be very easy too. I did BernardAlvarez.com a few years ago. I felt a little narcissistic doing it, but I'm like, it's just so much easier.
Reverse narcissism.
Exactly.
Own it, Bernard, own
it. Well, Michelle, it has truly been such a pleasure, and please, keep me in the loop. Let me know if something new is coming along, and we would love to have you come back and join us for another great discussion. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Enjoyed it.
Wonderful. Me too. And everybody, next week, actually, we were talking about transmuting today, but next week we are actually going to be focusing on inner alchemy. So join me for that. Same channel, same place. I love you, everyone. Have a wonderful week. Bye-bye.